Clubhouse.
Welcome to Decorating the Set from Hollywood to your home with your hosts, Beth Kushnick and Caroline Daly.
Hey guys, welcome back to Decorating the Set from Hollywood to your home. This is Caroline, and of course we have our fabulous host, Beth Kushnick.
Hi.
Beth, how are you doing today?
Good. I'm so excited that we're doing a special episode to end season 4 on the film Insidious that's opening in theaters today. I was in my AMC theater this week in Manhattan, and the poster for Insidious is there, and we're going to go see it.
Where you're like, I did that.
Yep.
I love it. So, okay, now I know that you are not a big horror lover. So what in the world drew you to a movie like Insidious, The Red Door?
I really didn't know anything about the franchise when I got the call for this job. And I initially turned it down, or said I wasn't interested in going further in the interview process. And I was going to take another job that was being offered to me. And when I told my assistant set decorator and my crew that I turned down Insidious, they said, no, don't do that.
They had like a revolt, huh?
They had a revolt.
Oh my
They
gosh.
said, we're going to New Jersey to shoot Insidious because of the New Jersey tax incentives. And a lot of them are Jersey guys, and they have kids, and are very well aware of this franchise, which I was not at all. So I watched a few Insidious films and called our guest, the fabulous production designer Adam Reamer, back and said, I've had a change of mind, and would you still allow me to interview for the film? It was interesting because I had never done a Zoom interview.
That's wild. Through all of COVID, never had to do a Zoom interview. Wow.
No. I read the script and was talking with Adam, and we had a real simpatico. I had never worked with him before, but I had a certain vision of one of the characters' sets or location, but the fact that it was going to be something specific I had mentioned to him, and he was like, felt that it was an interesting take on it. Just, I think, which came from the fact that I didn't know I wasn't close to the material. So he and Patrick Wilson, our director, who was also starred in former Insidious movies and stars in this one, I think they were very close to the material. So he thought I had an interesting take on it, and we had a great conversation, and the deal was done. I love it. I was going to New Jersey for the summer and doing a horror movie.
You packed your little bindle, and it had like a to New Jersey or bus kind of sign.
Yeah.
So this was like your first time, or one of your first times working in New Jersey? That seems crazy to me.
I don't think. I think it's been a good many years.
Wow.
Definitely my first foray into horror.
Now, how did you do? Because I know that you can be kind of a scaredy cat too, right? So how did you do with the ghoulishness of it all?
As our listeners will hear in our interview with Adam, we worked really hard to maintain the dichotomy of the two worlds. The very realistic world where you saw sets and locations that were dressed to a T. We didn't skimp anywhere, making that world realistic, whether it was an old person's house or a college dorm room or, any of the sets that we had to do. And then we went the same full out on the scary stuff. And we had some issues to deal with for special effects and visual effects. We had some things that had been established in the prior films that were a part of the franchise. And we took all those elements. We had a lot of analysis and meetings. I think back to my days on more serious jobs where we would have production meetings and art department meetings, that were so intense. And I found myself sitting in those meetings about Lipstick, one of the main creepy characters. And I think it got to a point where I realized it wasn't just something to think of that's easier or didn't matter, that the work as a set decorator and the production designer's work really mattered for driving the horror in the story.
You're braver than me, Beth. You're braver than me. I always tell myself that if I could see the sets and I could see everything, not in the movie theater, but just walk around the set, that I wouldn't be scared. I even asked the local haunted house place if they would let us come in with the lights on so I could show my kids how it all worked and stuff so that it wouldn't be so scary. I'm still scared. That's how good you guys are
now I know
at
the
this.
secret sauce. So I'm going to go to the movie theater and I am going to watch my horror movie, Insidious, The Red Door.
We have this amazing interview with Adam Reamer. Can you introduce him to our audience, please?
So we have this wonderful interview coming up with Adam Reamer, production designer, who I had the pleasure of collaborating with on Insidious, The Red Door. Our first collaboration, and hoping for many more. It was a great time, and you'll love the interview and the movie.
Joining us today is Adam Reamer, production designer for the newest installment of the Insidious horror franchise, Insidious The Red Door, which is out today in theaters everywhere. Adam, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you, our first production designer. Adam, before we get to Insidious, let's talk about your past and your story, starting from the point where you earned your degree in architecture from Penn State. What path brought you to being a production designer on a horror film franchise that's earned over $1 billion worldwide?
It's been a long and winding road. Certainly not linear. I got my degree in architecture and I moved to New York. That was at Penn State. I moved to New York in 2001. After 9/11, the building economy had sort of shut down. There wasn't a lot of work in architecture. And I answered an ad in the New York Times for a set carpenter. Now, I had some carpentry experience, but had never worked on sets in particular. But I wound up working at a set shop based in Brooklyn called Ready Set that was servicing the studio photography industry. And I worked there for a number of years, learned to build sets, scenic paint, took over managing that shop for several years. And that was kind of my intro to scenic design, the world of media. I took a break from that. I did design build architecture for a couple of years. Then I was living in Portland, Oregon, and a TNT show came to town called Leverage, and they were looking for a set designer. And I was recommended just because I had, some experience with scenery, some experience in architectural design, and wound up drafting sets for that show, and immediately just kind of fell in love with that world. And from there, I've just moved from show to show and, started assistant art directing and eventually production designing. So yeah, sort of like a collection of experiences, on the periphery of the film industry that eventually, just through like a little bit of ambition and a lot of luck, I found myself working in television.
Yeah, you've got to know all different aspects of design. We've done 4 seasons of the podcast talking about my work as a set decorator, but tell us more about the production designer's role and what you're responsible for.
Sure. Well, I heard another production designer not too long ago describe the production designer as a scenic architect or an architect for film, which I kind of like because I have that piece of my background. But it's, aside from it being a design role, it's also very much a management role because there's a lot of different departments beneath me that are contributing to the overall look of the film. So I'm working with the director and the cinematographer most specifically to develop the look of the film and a strategy for how we're going to shoot it, how we're going to tell the story. But then I have a set decoration department led by a set decorator like Beth, a property department, construction, paint, graphics, set design, special effects. And so it's a lot of coordinating, as well as my own like art department staff with an art director who's sort of like my right hand person. So a lot of the job is just coordinating a lot of different elements towards a common goal of like, what is the vision for this project? What is the look of the project?
Adam, before you started working on movies like 2021's The Voyeurs for Amazon or The Red Door, you worked on several TV shows like Don't Look Deeper, Pretty Little Liars, The Perfectionists, and The OA. Can you tell us a little bit about making that jump from TV to film and how the job that you do as a production designer changes? Or is it mostly the same?
I mean, it's similar in a lot of ways, except that the pace of episodic television is very fast. You're continuously prepping to shoot an episode while you're filming an episode, and it's nonstop, back to back. So usually you have a lot less time in prep to really develop an approach to craft the sets. It can be a little bit factory production. It was a great learning environment because the show that I worked on for the longest was called Grimm. It was an NBC show that was sort of a mashup of a police procedural and a horror fantasy show that, was inspired by Grimm's fairy tales. And the great benefit of that experience was that we were building a new world every week. There was so much variety to the types of sets and environments that we were creating that it really pushed me to develop a broad skill set and to think, just much more broadly about design in general. Like a 6-year crash course in every type of environment, interior, exterior, fantasy or not, that I might come across. And that was where I got my first production design credit, actually. It was after art directing that show for 4 years, and I was bumped up to designer for the last 2 of it. As far as my transition from television to film, I definitely had aspired to get into film through those earlier years working in television. And I had done a series with a writer-director named Michael Mohan for Netflix called Everything Sucks. That was like a half-hour format high school show set in the 90s. And when he brought his feature film, The Voyeurs, to Amazon, he brought me along with him as his designer. So it was just because of my relationship with Michael and having worked with him that I was able to get that first feature, which of course, like once you have that first feature, then it becomes, a marketing tool for my representation to try to get me more of that type of project. And since then, I haven't done any television. It's just been film since then.
Well, Beth, I know that this is your first horror film with Insidious. Tell me, Adam, isn't that so crazy? That seems so crazy to me because you've had such a wide variety of genres.
It's true. I mean, that's what really made me want to do it. And also having this opportunity to work with Adam. I think the difference in TV series and films for the production designer set decorator relationship is on a TV series, the designer is always prepping and I'm sort of staying as the decorator with the shooters. So we have less time to interact. So this was really like my old days doing movies. We got to really dive in, and also it helped to have time with Patrick, our director.
That's so true, Beth, that you and I lived in some of those spaces for days, really finessing the look. And that's something you can do in feature film, where in television, you're right, I would be off scouting for the next episode,
right,
while you were trying to get the set put together.
So what about, both you guys tell me, what was it like to work on a horror movie like this? The actual true horror. It sounds like Grimm was kind of half and half, but like this is full on horror. What was the big difference there? What did you think?
To me, what was really interesting and sort of what we came to was that the realistic sets, the houses, the school, the things that you would expect, dorm room, we really pushed the reality in those sets. And I think when it's time for the real horror of the scene, that's where we let loose and went crazy. But I think it's a really good balance. And the other thing that really interested me was that since this was such an iconic series, what could we bring set decorating wise, furniture wise, artwork wise from the prior films?
Yeah, good point. Just like in terms of the pace or flow of story in horror, you're moving between moments of calm and then moments of scary, and that's sort of like the roller coaster ride that the audience goes on. And I think horror films need that kind of rhythm, right? To sort of lull the audience into a place of comfort and then shock them with the horror. The same is true in the world that we create for that to happen. Is we need to create those environments that feel normal so that when we do hit those scary moments, then they're that much more effective.
I think some of the scariest moments, even reading the script, are in the more normal environments.
Right. So you get that you get that contrast of what feels like it should be, someone just eating cereal in their living room that
right.
really takes a different direction very quickly.
What was your general approach when you had your initial meetings with Patrick and design-wise? I mean, for us, it was also interesting time-wise. A lot of the decision-making in terms of what was going to be a location and what was going to be a set, that shifted in the prep process. Adam was so nimble in, being able to both budget and design and then totally change direction. But what were some of the concepts that you brought to Patrick?
Well, I think just right along the lines of what we were talking about, part of my process for all films is to really start with a pretty intuitive process of pulling images and even creating palettes of texture and color that are kind of what like I call squint colors, which is a scenic painter's term for when there's a bunch of colors and you squint your eyes and you try to find the average of them. And so I kind of like go through this exercise where I try to envision what is the squint color of the film, what's its feel in terms of color and texture. And so then I'll take that palette and sort of see like how I can apply it. How does it apply globally to the project? How can I apply it more specifically to certain characters or environments? And so really the communication of that concept is all done visually because I put together a lookbook of images and palettes that really try to describe in a more general way what I think the visual feel of the picture should be. To tack on to what you said earlier, the process also began with an analysis of the previous films and figuring out what worked and what needed to be brought into this film to kind of keep the consistency of the story world versus where were places that because of character development or story development needed to deviate from that.
We were lucky in terms of this film because in terms of the budget, and I think also the expectation and having Patrick as the director, it was a much more elevated attempt that we made. It was decided that the look really had to support the script and tell the story in, I think, a more elevated way than it had been in the past.
This franchise, like many of the horror franchises, especially at Blumhouse, they start as very micro-budget projects. And it's really story, and it's really what the actor, director, and writer are kind of bringing in concept. That's the strength of the film. And production design may not be as important of an element or doesn't quite get the resources on a project of that scale. And once, you're in your fifth movie and the budget's a lot bigger, there's an expectation across the board that you can elevate the subject material by supporting it with the design. You had mentioned that, we had to pivot quite a bit in prep between what was a location and what was a stage build, which is always challenging, especially you have a limited amount of time to put this thing together and when you have to make big changes midway. So we had intended on building a lot more of the sets on our soundstage. Unfortunately, that didn't quite work out financially for the overall project. And so we had to pivot to doing a lot more on location. And I think it's a challenge for sure, but in a way, sometimes limiting factors can really help you to narrow the focus of your concept, of your design. And at a certain point when we realize, okay, we're not going to build all of these sets, we don't have total creative control over them. Let's find pieces that work for us, and then those pieces inform the total picture. Once you start to put some puzzle pieces in place and say, okay, this is a look that we have to embrace. This is a color we have to embrace.
And I think it's hard sometimes for other members of the crew, from DP to director even, to feel confident visually that that's going to work, that we can create the match, that we can do what, the magic that we do. But you were really good at convincing everybody.
A great example of that was the art studio. It was the most beautiful old building on the Drew campus that was sort of a Gothic stone building. And it was the favorite building on campus of our director, Patrick. He had to have it in the movie, but there wasn't really a place for it to make sense in the movie. And upstairs, there's this giant hall with, 2 stories tall with enormous, intricate leaded glass windows and these big decorative wood beams. And I kind of thought maybe we could make the art studio in this space. It was a strange place to have an art studio, right? So it was like, in reality, it was a bit of a stretch, but I felt like conceptually we could do something really impactful in this space and really make it special. And the character Dalton, the son of the family who's gone off to college, he's studying art. So this was a really important set where he's interacting with his art instructor and he's developing his own artworks that really are fueling the story movement through his subconscious coming out onto the page. So we wound up with what could have been a very bland box of a art studio with white walls, and instead we had something that was architecturally rich and grand and even had that sort of spookiness of sort of old Gothic architecture. One
of my favorite sets to dress in the film, and considering all those elements and that it was so large, we did need some artists' racks and some bigger pieces to push the storyline there, but it was something that would never have been an art studio on any campus, and Adam both made it smaller by building out a wall, and we also put set dressing in that worked for the size of the room.
I think it was really successful in the end. I think, it photographed really well, and it adds a drama to those moments of the story that you just wouldn't get out of a traditional college art studio.
It certainly sounds like this was a favorite set of both of y'all's. Is that true? Would you say that this was within this film, this set was like the one that really drew you guys?
That was the most authentic, realistic set, non-scary. But the scary set was our favorite, and all of these locations had no air conditioning. So,
oh my gosh,
they're
all scary sets. Then
they're
for
all
me,
scary sets.
Yes, that's
I think I almost died of heat exhaustion one day when we were working in the lair.
Yes,
imagine, good Lord.
In the lair, which we were dressing on an attic kind of floor. I don't know, it was over 100 degrees in there, and we almost scary thing lost Adam that day.
Oh no. Oh goodness. You guys must run into so many crazy, we've got to figure this out kind of issues that come along. Were there any in this project that made you guys be like, oh my God, this is so crazy, but we can fix it?
All of them.
Yeah, but
I think that every time.
I think that location specifically, the set was Lipstick's lair. This is the lair of the key monster villain of the franchise. And this was a favorite set. It was challenging for a number of reasons. One is that the set was already established in the first movie, but there wasn't any way that we could realistically recreate the exact set, which was shot in a location in Los Angeles that doesn't even exist anymore. At first, the approach was like, well, how do we sort of cheat this location to be that original location? And the more we got into it, the more we realized there's no merit in trying to recreate that. We can do something way better.
Lipstick got new digs.
And, we were able to really elevate the design of that space while still, like we spoke about earlier, still pulling threads from that original set through in terms of the colors of red drapery and sculptural objects and chandeliers. But it was sort of our own version of it. So it was very challenging to find the tone of that space in its new incarnation. But also it was the most rewarding, I think, to take something that had been established as early as that little first movie and make it really a new, grand, beautiful, terrifying space.
if you take the scariness out of it, it's so cinematic and really gorgeous. You know, it's creepy, but it's a beautiful set in a location that really worked.
I super get it when you guys say that, like the more normal the set, the scarier the happening actually was. Because I imagine for the audience that must feel like then it could happen when I'm walking down the street or when I'm just in my normal, like you said, eating my breakfast, you know, that kind of thing.
That location, which was also on the Drew campus, the building is called Seminary Hall. It's the seminary school, or was, of the college. It was essentially a chapel with vaulted ceilings and a balcony and incredible woodwork and big tall windows. And we had a lot of limitations on the biggest challenge, I think, was that we realized very late in the game that we only had a couple of days to prep this location. Well, we needed 2 weeks to prep this location. That's
Isn't
how big
that always
the transformation.
The way, you guys?
It is.
Every time it's like, we need 2 weeks, you have 2 days.
Yeah, and it very nearly crushed the whole concept. Luckily, with help from production and locations and flexibility from my team and Beth's team, we managed to like sneak in there for half a day here, half a day there, do what we could, and over the course of weeks, like gradually get it there so that when we had that final push of a couple of days, it was still a big push, but we'd done everything we could to lay the groundwork. But that's always more difficult too. You're splitting crews from this place to that place and doing partial work, and
you know how set
really
decoration is always like the last line of defense. I honestly felt when we were in there, you know, because my team was basically waiting for construction and scenic, I honestly had that twinge of a panic that we weren't going to make it. But in the end, I remember...
Beth, you always do make it.
No,
always.
I know, but you know...
It's true, but it doesn't make it easier.
Feels it,
No,
huh?
no. I honestly, like in my bones, I felt like this isn't happening. While I was down the hall mutilating doll heads, you know, as my contribution to
It's
my
like more
craft.
cowbell. You're like more doll
Me and my
heads.
teamster, who's a
Absolutely.
big fan of the Insidious, we drove around with a scary doll, life-size doll in our car during this job.
Yeah, I will say, I think like the heat may have only been a contributing factor to my near death. There might have
That's
been some sleeplessness and a high degree of stress.
Anxiety, just a full panic attack. Oh my gosh. Well, are there some things that when I'm watching the show, when I get brave enough to turn this on, or go to the theater and see, either one, is there something I should be looking out for? Is there something that gives a little tidbit of something that as the audience we can say, oh, they said that on the podcast and I totally saw it in the film? Is there anything in there we should be looking for?
Well, I did have an artist recreate some of the artwork that was in the earlier Insidious movies. And both Patrick and our producer were like shocked, you know, said, where did you get that? It was great. It made it feel like home.
Yeah, I would say, like, you know, when you see a set like the art classroom, realize that was sort of an empty ballroom,
nothing
on a second floor. You know, like look at everything behind the decoration and the scenery and realize that was nothing even remotely resembling an art student before again. Or look at the lair and realize that it was a church that now has a full proscenium stage with, you know, curtains all around and an antique backdrop and, you know, all of these great old antique props and lighting equipment and
creepy mannequins.
I think that's
galore.
That's totally unnecessary. All mannequins are creepy, no? We just say mannequins.
No,
pretty much.
No,
they're all disgusting
creepy.
and scary.
We painted them and made them extra creepy.
Yeah, these are next level.
Oh my God, next level creepy. Am I even ready for this? I don't know if I am. I have to know. Okay, just to gauge how scary. What's your favorite horror movie, Adam? Do you have one?
Oh, jeez.
Of course, you cannot say Insidious, The Red Door. Obviously,
no,
that's
so
your favorite.
like
but
a favorite classic horror movie for me is actually The Shining.
Ooh, that's a goodie.
And a favorite, more recent one would be The Witch.
Oh, I haven't seen The Witch. You recommend?
Very much so.
Nice. Beth, what about you? Do you actually watch any or
No,
can you handle
no,
it?
I'm
What's as scary as you
completely the
go?
wrong. I would say something like The Shining. Yes,
Yeah.
I've seen that. Okay, help me out.
Okay, I'm going to tell you guys this. So
no,
for me,
wait, I got it.
Go ahead.
James Caan, Kathy Bates.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
Deliverance.
Stephen King. Misery.
Deliverance?
Misery.
Yeah.
That
Deliverance is scary in a whole
movie.
different way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a different vibe altogether.
It's a different vibe. But yeah, Misery. No, you're right. And you're right. The more normal, just in a woman's
Right.
house.
Yep.
You know, and yet you don't know what is like hidden in there.
Yeah,
Creepy. You
But
guys.
I really like Ari Aster, who did the director who did Hereditary and Midsummer. I really enjoy his particular flavor of horror. And Robert Eggers, who did The Witch, he's done some other kind of creepy movies. Like those are two of my favorite in the horror genre these days.
All right, you guys, here's a recommendation. The Third Day with Jude Law. Whoa, this was so crazy. It was a several day kind of, which sounds funny to say 'cause it's called The Third Day, but it was like they showed like on different nights, they were showing different things. They had like a live portion, a whole live portion where they were filming it and the audience was in on it for it was like 12 hours or something like that. It was crazy. Somehow in the Pod Clubhouse pool, I pulled like the 4 a.m. shift. So I was watching the scariest part alone on a couch, just like, oh, like who's next to cover this? Because it was so scary for me. But man, again, same kind of stuff, like normal town, normal stuff, but then creepy business. And you're like, oh, that's what makes it so scary.
Sounds good.
You know, one thing I think about horror film fans, they're really devoted. I think they're really adept at finding those little Easter eggs everywhere and making the connections from one film to the next in a franchise. So
Absolutely.
I think that's going to happen a lot for them in Insidious 5.
Yeah, we definitely peppered Easter eggs throughout, whether that's artwork or small props, things like that.
That's fun. So listeners, you guys definitely look out for those because that's like the most fun when you can be like on a scavenger hunt. It probably makes it a little less scary for people like me.
Right.
If I'm looking for the artwork. So full disclosure, you guys, I'm a giant scaredy cat. So I'm going to ask you guys about the secret in the sauce, about how you guys take these different elements and pull the audience in for a scare. Like how you kind of, maybe as a watcher can prep myself a little bit if I have some sort of clue in that like, okay, this is how the environment might look. And then I know something scary is going to happen. It sounds to me like you guys played on that quite a bit.
I would say that you're certainly not going to miss any of the scare, but there's really a balance of light, colors, and a sort of normalcy in many of the scenes. And then when you go through the red door, it's hit hard. So we had the most fun, I think, when we went full out.
For sure. The crafting of the scares really happens in direction and performance and editing more than anything.
Right. We give them the whole scary enchilada and they just choose what they're going to look at and what they're going to focus on. But we filled it up.
A lot of that is Beth and I giving them the best tools to make that happen on the day even, so that they have the right kinds of practical lights in a set to create a mood that's going to leave, dark, sort of mysterious corners or highlight certain things. And that's so important to mood, giving the gaffer and the cinematographer a lot of lighting tools, even in how we treat windows with blinds or shears or drapes, where you can get a little bit of movement or slats of light. All of these things kind of contribute to creating that environment of the scare. And it's the technicians on set who are employing those to really fine tune, how it plays out.
All right. So one of our favorite topics over the years is when a project shoots on location, and we've gotten a chance to talk to some location scouts, and we understand that Insidious, The Red Door, shot in Morristown, New Jersey. Tell us a little bit about that location work, which is crazy to me. My sister lives next door in Florham Park, so that's funny.
And my parents live in Convent Station, which is also
I love it.
Morristown adjacent. So I was pretty familiar with the area already. A lot of the story takes place at an East Coast or a Northeast college of, it's not exactly clear geographically where it is, but it just sort of has that Northeast vibe. And so we drew University in Madison was sort of like the core of that. And we got a lot of our locations there, some for the school and some otherwise. But I think the look of even the residential architecture surrounding that area, a lot of it has like a very sort of typical Northeast look, which worked. The trickier thing was that we also had 2 locations, interior and exterior, that were back in the original home of the series, which is, Southern California area. So finding a townhouse that could kind of fit that mold, and also another house for the character Renee, was a little trickier. But all in all, I think we did it. And we found some good stuff. And I think it worked. I think we were able to really, play those 2 different kinds of looks off of each other and not feel like we were, all in the same geographical place.
And we added some greens, and a lot of greens, actually, which made a difference. And then we were on the stage also. So it was like a summer job on location, because it's far where we were. Right. And we had a lot of matching and things that we did on the stage in New Jersey, thanks to the New Jersey tax credits. Mm-hmm, and my first job in New Jersey as well. First horror film, first job in Jersey.
Wow.
That seems insane, Beth. How did that happen? You're like, oh, it's so far. It's just New Jersey.
I was so lucky.
Far.
It was far. I was so lucky to find Beth because it was a very busy time for production in New York and New Jersey when we started up in June or July of last year. And I was really fortunate to find Beth, who's so experienced, has an amazing team, knows every resources, has relationships with every vendor. I was really glad I was able to bring her in. And it doesn't matter if it's your first horror film or not. If you're, you got the resources, you got the team, you got the know-how and the experience.
I found the creepy stuff.
It all comes together.
We really had such a good time. I mean, my whole entire team was. It really makes a difference when everyone is just so into it. They're into it. Their kids are into it. It's quite the franchise.
Yeah, and I remember you telling me when we first met that you weren't sure if you wanted to take a project at the time, but you told your crew what it was, and they said, we have to do it.
I actually did have another offer at the time, and I had decided to take that job, and I told my crew, and they said, no way, we're doing Insidious. They said, too much, huh? We're only coming with you if you take Insidious. And I, too, am a scaredy cat and had never seen any of the prior Insidious films, so I sat down and had an Insidious marathon.
Oh my god.
Speaking of which, Blumhouse, one of the producing companies on the film, has certainly figured out the genre of horror.
Yeah, and, I think that specialization certainly helps. That they kept their genre scope small, and really tried to perfect that one thing rather than having more diversified types of programming. Blumhouse started with very micro-budget films, like we talked about earlier, and it was really about finding those good stories with good writer, director, performer combos that brought concept. And now that they've grown and we're doing projects on a larger scale, there's still sort of that commitment to real stories within genre. So even though it's all horror, I think there's often like a lot of really interesting subtext, be that, sort of social or familial. Like in Insidious, it's a
like
horror
the family
movie,
relationship, the father-son dynamic.
It's really about family conflict and how we suppress our demons, or how they, are metaphorical demons, and they surface and we learn to live with them. And I think that's something that Blumhouse has done well, is like finding those stories that are genre horror but have a deeper level of meaning. And then they give a lot of creative control to their writers, directors. So the concept is not watered down by too much committee decision making.
I think also the actors really feel it because they all seem to come back for more. So I think they, interestingly enough, establish, a 5-movie franchise with Insidious And now with Patrick directing, it's a big jump in development of characters.
It's not that common that you have a franchise that runs for so long and maintains audience interest. So often it's like, oh, the first one was good and then whatever. But Blumhouse has had more than one franchise where, people say, I don't love that first Insidious. They say, I love Insidious or
Right.
Purge or whatever it is. They've managed to, maintain a level of quality and interest and fan base in these longer running franchises.
Well, Insidious, The Red Door is going to be the most popular one.
I think so.
I love that. And I know just by talking to the two of you guys how much TLC went into this one. It sounds like you guys really went the extra mile, which I think audiences are going to appreciate, especially those Easter eggs. People love that.
Absolutely. There was a lot of passion, a lot of collaboration, and I think in the end we did some beautiful work.
Yeah.
And these days, Beth, I feel like we talk a lot about like professionalism. It sounds like you guys work together fabulously, which is wonderful.
We did.
That doesn't always
It was
happen,
great.
right?
Absolutely.
It was a great collaboration, and we're
It was.
going to do it again.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
We
All
are
right,
very
so I'll-
fortunate to have a
I'll pop
crew across the board. All aspects of our crew just worked well together. And that's the best when, the workplace is not conflict or strife, but, just sort of collective creative energy. You get your best work that way.
Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. If people want to follow you on social media or the internet, where can they find you?
They can find my website is reamerdesign.com. And my personal / professional Instagram is at AJ Reamer.
Thank you so much.
Adam, thank you so much. Yay. We're so glad we got to talk to you. And we're so excited for all of you guys who are listening. Please make sure you head to the movie theaters as soon as you're done listening to this episode, because Insidious, The Red Door, rated PG-13, is out today, July 7th, only in movie theaters. So get out there, get your popcorn, enjoy, bring your blanket. It's always chilly inside. Thanks so much, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Adam for joining us today. We hope that you enjoyed this special episode of the 4th season of Decorating the Set from Hollywood to Your Home.
Thank you so much to Adam. And again, Insidious, The Red Door is rated PG-13 and is out today, July 7th, only in movie theaters. That's going to do it for this episode. And thank you all for listening. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Decorating the Set from Hollywood to Your Home at Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please leave it a 5-star review. It helps a lot in the promotion of the show. 5 stars, people. Thanks for listening.
Decorating the Set from Hollywood to Your Home is an original Pod Clubhouse production. Recorded, edited, and produced at Pod Clubhouse Studios. For more information, please visit us online at podclubhouse.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Decorating the Set at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening.